is a special edition of NBC 10 at Issue with Philadelphia Independent Mayoral candidate Wali Diop Rahman.
And welcome back to this special edition of NBC 10 at Issue. I'm Steve Highsmith. We continue our discussion with Mr. Wali Diop Rahman, independent candidate for mayor. Diop is president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Diop Ulugbala is on the ballot under his legal name, Wali Rahman. Thanks again for being here. Appreciate it. Let's begin with a question again from a viewer, and this question is from Roan. Roan asks, how do you plan to address the persistent city budget deficits, and why wouldn't you, this is the second part, want to have Bill Clinton campaigning for you like Nutter has?
Well, the budget deficit, I first of all believe is misleading in terms of how it's being characterized. Because while the city claims to be, $2 billion in the red, more or less, somehow it finds $1 billion a year to spend on police, prisons, and courts. And those systems and programs that would generate resources not only for the city but for the community are being neglected. I believe strongly that the solution to the budget crisis is investment in economic development, creation of small businesses, creation of jobs for the people, so that not only do they have a way to feed themselves, but that would expand the tax base from which the city can draw resources to solve the budget crisis.
You would use taxpayers' dollars to help seed these businesses? I mean, would you give them in the form of loans to people, to grants?
Yeah, there'll be a range everywhere from the loan process as well as grants should be made available.
And how would you select those individuals?
Well,
what if they're not trained for something?
Yeah, of course, training would have to be part of it in terms of making sure that people are qualified to not only build businesses, but also occupy jobs and positions, that sometimes require skills, other times simply require certain type of experiences that many people in the community do have.
On Roan's other question about, would you like Bill Clinton to come in and campaign with you?
Bill Clinton, well, it's interesting because Bill Clinton, from what I know, has on a national level put forth a general policy of police containment similar to that which we see being carried out by the Democratic Party on a local level in the form of stop and frisk. In 1994, I believe, the U.S. crime bill was introduced through Bill Clinton's administration, where over 150,000 police were unleashed on our communities throughout the country. I don't believe that that's an appropriate usage of the people's resources, and I don't need an endorsement from Bill Clinton or anybody else in the Democratic Party. What I need is a relationship with the community that I serve, and that's exactly what I'm aspiring to do.
Do you believe most police officers are bullies?
I think that the police have an institutional relationship to the community, notwithstanding some quote-unquote good intentions that some cops have. Some people out here even have relatives of themselves maybe police and maybe nice people when they take off the uniform, but when they put it on, they are responsible for carrying out a certain policy, similar policy that resulted in my unjust arrest. Notwithstanding how nice of a guy the guy that brutalized me may be, when it came time for him to do his quote-unquote job, he did his job, and it was a job that was defined by the ruling elite of this city. This
institutional mistrust that exists between members of the black community, some other communities, and the powers that be in this country. Is that one of the reasons that sometimes people support people that maybe they otherwise wouldn't? And for example, Mumia Abu-Jamal. Why do you support Mumia? Is it simply because you have this deep-seated mistrust of the system and think, therefore, there's a good chance they messed up in his case? Or do you really believe that case?
Oh, I really believe that Mumia Abu-Jamal is innocent. But for me, the question goes even beyond so-called guilt or innocence, because the real question is, what is the role that the police, one of whom Mumia Abu-Jamal has been accused of murdering, what is the role that the police have in our communities as a whole? And if we can answer that question in an honest way and say that the solution to crime and violence in our community is not just to flood the community with cops who have an antagonistic relationship with the people, but the real solution is to check the police, to intervene and make sure that the police really represent the interests of the people. And before that happens, I don't think that we should even entertain a discussion about whether Mumia was guilty or innocent. It's about him being attacked for criticizing that relationship that the police have in my community.
You live in Germantown. Had you moved to Osage Avenue before 1985, would you have liked to have lived next to that MOVE compound?
would I have liked to live? I don't understand what your
question. The question being is that there are folks, some of your supporters who, maybe you yourself, very critical of what happened on that move day in 1985, on May 13th, 1985. But they forget one thing, that many of the people who were living in that block were African American, and many of those people did not like those folks as neighbors. They felt that there was too much trash around, that there were rats and things running around. They were concerned about the children who were living in that compound. It isn't a strictly clear case of the police messed up or the good administration messed up. It's a complicated story of what happened there that day, don't you think?
No, it's not complicated.
You don't think so? You don't think that MOVE bears any responsibility for what happened?
You see the results of what happened in 1985, where not just the MOVE house was incinerated, but the entire surrounding community, even homes that may have been owned by people who may have been critics of MOVE, but nobody benefited from the dropping of a C4 bomb of the entire community.
I'm not saying that. What I'm asking is, no, I'm not. Well, let me clarify.
Yeah, you're asking me if I believe that, and the answer is no. I think that
you don't think the MOVE people who were living there, the adults who were living there, bear any responsibility for what happened that day?
Not at all. The responsibility rests squarely on the shoulders of Wilson Good, the Philadelphia Police Department, Rendell, etc. These are the forces that not only dropped the bomb on MOVE, but on the entire community. And even if there were people who were criticizing MOVE for these small issues, certainly did not want for an intervention like that which we saw.
The people who were the adults in that compound fired weapons out. Did they have a right to fire those weapons out to police?
There's no evidence. There's no evidence to support that. There's no evidence to support that.
We'll move on from there. The school system. You want to do a lot with education. How would you change the school system?
I believe strongly in a community-controlled, elected school board with power to hire and fire faculty, staff, and administration. The school board would function on district-wide level. When I say district, I don't mean city-wide, but actual organizational entities within each particular geographic area of the city, North Philly, West Philly, Southwest, etc. And these boards, elected boards of education, would have that direct ability to hire, fire faculty, staff, and administration, as well as give shape and definition to what the school curriculum looks like.
How does that work with existing teachers' unions, for example?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that the teachers' union is going to have to sit down with this community-controlled board of education and work out. Right now, I think that the teachers' union should be a champion, perhaps the strongest champion of the demand that I'm raising up in my platform, to make sure that the people themselves have the final say in terms of who would be educating their children. That's the spirit of education and democracy.
Who would be ultimately responsible? Would the mayor, would there be an overarching superintendent over all these?
Well, there would certainly be, again, a community-controlled elected board of education, and on a regular basis, the leadership of each of these district-wide entities. But you have a lot of it being the district-run, ground up. The leadership of each of these district-wide entities would come together, and we can call it, whatever we want for the purposes of this interview, but the point is that they would come together and make sure that there is a harmonious and organized process through which resources are allocated to different parts of the city and policy is consistent and not conflicting with one another, etc. But the point is that there needs to be a much more localized and democratic process through which specific communities can really determine how the school system relates to their community. We can't act like the needs of Northeast Philadelphia are the same as the needs of North Philly or Southwest.
All right. More to come with Wali Diop Rahman in his own words in a moment on NBC 10 at Issue. Stay tuned.
You're watching the special edition of NBC 10 at Issue.